Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek, Episode 4, The Voyager pilot, Caretaker.
Brace for impact.
For this crew, trapped in deep, deep space, there is more to fear than fear itself. And if they are to survive it all,
Get down!
they must survive together.
Fire tasers.
Cannot be destroyed. Prepare for the 2-hour world premiere of Star Trek Voyager.
Premiering on UPN 20 tonight at 7.
It was like an accident between two horse-drawn carriages.
Yeah.
Like, no joke. It was like, and they were standing around, and the wheel of one was all fucked up or something. And
Yeah.
they're all like, "What do we do here?" And the
That was
horses looked
before the
bored.
mall was there.
Oh, long before, yeah. That was where
They just had that tavern that was out.
yeah. And then down the way was Tyson's
Yeah.
Corner store, like
Right.
the actual Tyson's Corner, the store that was at this intersection of 123 and.
That was even before it was a proper indoor mall.
The cool part is that this is all totally relevant to
Yeah,
the
okay.
thematic.
Yeah.
Perhaps we're not super enthusiastic about talking about.
Well,
Voyager. It's a good pilot. It's fine.
It's hard to look at it without bias because like I know what's to come, you know.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean it sort of sets you, your first impression is like this is all right, It's Star Trek. This if I'm jonesing for Star Trek, well, this is delivering. But it does. That's just the pilot. It's not the greatest pilot, but it's all right.
I mean, part of what makes it hard is that you know that they don't pan out the ideas.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know, like Paris, they introduced Paris as this kind of guy. He's like, he was part of the Federation, and then he was part of the Maquis. But the real truth is, he has no allegiance because he's a selfish asshole.
He's a mercenary.
He's
Yeah.
the
Anybody who'll
troublemaking
pay my
maverick
bar
guy.
bills.
Yeah, and then like Chakotay, he's part of the Maquis. He's a terrorist, but he's got this honor about him, right? He's all honorable and stuff.
And all of a sudden, he's second in command.
yeah, and
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about all that. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's the ending is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then the way Chakotay and Paris sort of like, come together, it's kind of like, well, was it the point that Chakotay had honor and that Paris just didn't know he had honor yet? Because by the end of the episode, you don't know that Paris was like a totally different character, basically.
Yeah. Well, I agree, and I think that's. I mean, we can skip to that part because it is at the top of mind with Paris in particular, Paris and Chakotay, because the way they set that up. I was about to say nowadays, but honestly, even back then, because Deep Space Nine did precisely this. The way they set that up is everything before the end of the episode, right? Is the setup is saying they have a pre-existing history. They don't like each other. They have different perspectives. One is more nihilistic and practical. One is more, honorable and et cetera, et cetera. And that sets up a great character dynamic.
Right.
The scene where Paris rescues Chakotay should have been A, an entire episode, and B, maybe like in season 2 or 3. It should have been down the line
Yeah.
where they're constantly like fighting and having like getting into
That's a good
things,
point.
That's
That's a good point.
Instead, it was resolved in the first episode.
Yeah, because he's set up at, okay, you have this sort of crazy cast it's different than other casts, but still sort of similar in a Star Trek sort of way. But he's set up as the troublemaking maverick guy.
Yeah.
And then he's not anymore.
And then and it's,
Everybody else, the tight ass ensign fresh out of the academy, he's still the tight ass ensign fresh
Yeah.
out of the academy.
Yeah.
well, so yeah, and so Chakotay it's not so much that Chakotay forgives Paris. Now, I don't know if they were joking or if they were being truthful about like the whole joke of like, oh, now he owes him his life because that's like some like Native American kind of
Yeah.
thing,
So
like-
I think
It's
it,
some weak ass Native American.
yeah,
stuff.
right. First of all, the Native American stuff and it gets pretty weak.
So I think that is an issue that Voyager continues to have, and apparently, according to some of the background, the producers had the good intentions of. They said they wanted to use a Native American character. They were building on this storyline they had in TNG about the American Indian colony that was going to be in the land that the peace treaty they made with the Cardassians.
Now, was this a continuation of like the same problems the Native Americans have today, where they keep getting pushed out to the borderlands or shit places or whatever?
So, from a plot sense and from a meta real world sense, yes, because from the plot sense you're correct, but also from a meta sense, it's an example of appropriating the Native American culture with some sort of like pseudo, we're sorry, white people are sorry what we did to you, so we're going to represent you in culture. But the fucked up thing is because it's white people, they do it wrong, and they make them look like sort of backwoods, like weird mountain people.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that, by the way. No, but so in TNG, there was that the whole Maquis storyline was set up, and I believe partly with the purpose of launching this, going into this show, they were thinking ahead, which is a key thing at this stage in Star Trek, is where you have TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and they're all doing whatever they can to overlap them and connect them, which is cool.
Because it does. They are at Deep Space Nine in the beginning.
Yeah, and they started Deep Space
And you
Nine.
have Quark.
No.
And you don't have Quark is the character that bridges the
but
series.
so
Right, and Quark is the character that allows the exposition to be like to introduce Harry's character, and to sort of introduce how Harry and Tom are different but friends.
Yeah.
Like that whole scene is just sort of it's the expositional.
it's
kind
a
of
little
thing.
clunky in this whole episode. It's not terrible, but it's not as bad as some of the Encounter at Farpoint stuff, but it's kind of a little in your face. It's not as organic as the Emissary, the Deep Space Nine introductory commentary. But the behind-the-scenes stuff about the American Indian stuff, well, it starts with the TNG episode, which was set up as the Cardassians and the Federation are going to sign a peace treaty, and part of that peace treaty, they're going to swap territory. It's a land swap,
Wait, I'm sorry. Could you? I missed that. I was spaced for a second because I meant to ask this. Where were you just? Did you just say where this Maquis thing began?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this
it began
starts
in TNG or DS9.
TNG.
Okay.
Well, and Deep Space Nine. Now I'm getting all mixed up because there is DS9 stuff there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Shit. Maybe it's the DS9 stuff. Anyway, we'll look it up and put it in the show notes. But regardless, previously there was a treaty being made that involved a land swap, and one of the storylines was that there were, and I'm pretty sure this was TNG, where there were American Indians who had created a new colony out in this area. And that colony was going to be now on the Cardassian side, right? And so there was this whole thing about
I vaguely do remember that.
Yeah. And anyway, so the backstory is that they had this whole, there's some stuff involving the American Indians, so it didn't come out of the blue. But apparently they signed up a consultant to, consult about the American Indian, native peoples, Aboriginal peoples sort of culture and all that. But supposedly it turns out this guy was a total sham and made it all up, basically. I think the producers were not entirely aware of that. Other podcasts and resources may have better information on that. But regardless, I think ultimately the agreement is that the Voyager, well-intentioned, but maybe didn't handle the whole American Indian stuff right. And it was weird that Paris was so he was like, "Aren't you going to turn into like a bird or something?"
Yeah.
I was like, "That's weird."
Yeah, because like the characters.
It's like something you'd say to Odo, not to just like a human man.
Right, yeah. It wouldn't be racist if you said it to Odo. I mean, it might be slightly, I guess, but not. I don't know. It seems like
It'd be more presumptuous.
Presumptuous, yeah. Yeah, you're right. It seems like the only character traits that really stuck around for a lot of these people were these sort of weak, general, sort of like broad sort of, assumptions, so
And how come like you're a Mexican guy with a weird tattoo on your face, and that makes you like an American Indian? Like what's with the weird tattoo?
It was. I think that's the trying too hard.
Yeah.
Not actually having an understanding of natives' culture.
And and the life debt stuff, isn't that just from like the Wookiees? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's sort
just
of
got that from
nebulous.
Star Wars.
It sounds like what white people think this stuff is supposed to be.
Yeah, this is some
Because they
white
saw it.
people
They saw it
eat
in
up
a
shit.
movie.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting about this episode is I do think it starts strong. I think the sort of the production value and the story, like as it begins, is interesting. you're wondering what's happening, and then there's the stuff on Deep Space Nine, which again the writing's not fantastic, but it's you're kind of like, okay, what's going on here, and especially once they get sucked into the Delta Quadrant and into the weird Twilight Zone, X-Files, alien abduction business. That's sort of interesting for a while. I just think it doesn't end. It resolves everything too neatly, and I don't know.
Well, it kind of like it makes. I don't know if this was their point. I don't know if they meant to do this, but it makes this caretaker guy seem kind of like inept. Like, because what does he do? He's taking care of this race of people, right? And his way of taking care of this race of people is to capture all these motherfuckers from all over the universe or the galaxy or wherever, presumably, and then basically kill them, you know?
Yes.
Like, and what was his one line? He says, "Oh, they're not sick." Like,
Right.
They're just incompatible.
I just decided to kill them, you know, like basically is what he's saying. They're incompatible, which is basically like, I didn't give a fuck. I just wanted to see if I could mate with them, and if they died, oh well. But it's all because I'm trying to save these fucking people. And those people that they were saving apparently used to be all like kind of smart, you know, have some sort of strong mental
Yeah, they
powers.
hint at the magic mental business.
Yeah, that was the only real backstory you get on this race of people. That's the other thing. Is I know that the race of people, I guess it wasn't the point. The point wasn't these people, and I guess the idea is you'd learn more about them through tests later on. I don't remember if you really do learn much about them.
Kind of. There's a
Kind
whole
of,
story
sorta.
there. The actress went crazy, so they had to get rid of her.
Yeah, right. She was in a few other things too.
Yeah, but she even went crazy recently. And I apologize for using the term crazy. I don't know what the proper psychiatric. She has an actual mental problem. She has an issue. We should be sympathetic to that, but
She's not just crazy.
So
Yeah.
and so
She actually has problems.
So these people that the caretaker was trying to like fucking save, they apparently used to be very able-bodied and smart and all this shit, and he basically stuck them underground to try to take care of them, and he made them feeble. So these people he's killing these people to try to protect these other people that he made feeble as a result of him fucking up their planet.
yeah. So I think we might as well get into some of these plot dynamics that are confusing, because that you've hit the nail on the head there. First of all, I think another key difference here, and again, prefacing it with overall entertaining, sort of generally well acted, generally well produced, pretty interesting story, but I couldn't really figure out what thematic element was going on. What was happening? What was the
Right.
point of the story? It was more like, here are a series of plot points.
Right.
Taken together, they take you on a mildly entertaining journey, but for what purpose? Where Emissary was all about just multidimensional thinking about PTSD, basically.
And it was also telling you about a civilization of people and their
Yeah.
history, and the motives that result from their history, also based upon like their traditions, which is
Yeah.
also mixed with history, but other factors too. And
Yes.
like PTSD and like. And interesting characters that carried these traits. The Voyager character traits. I mean, Baylana is probably the most complex character you can find there, because she
Yeah.
gets angry sometimes.
Exactly. I was thinking that. I was like, it's so hard to control this anger.
Yeah, and that's the-
okay.
and
That's the Klingon half.
That's the Klingon half. And the-
Racist.
and-
Again, I think it's a racist
Why isn't
show.
that the human half?
Yeah, right, exactly. And when I say most complex, meaning because nothing else is for the character traits are that complex. Like I said, Paris was supposed to be this kind of like, I'm a blah, 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 and he's supposed to be, like you said, at odds with Chakotay, but they fucking tie that up in a package because of some sort of like trope about Native Americans having some kind of like, owe you my life debt because you
Yeah.
saved mine. And that's what all that carries on, are these show me your animal guide and all that shit, like,
Yeah.
like, and so I'm trying to think of any character that had any sort of complexity to them. The Doctor is kind of like maybe
Doctor's all right.
Yeah,
For a hologram.
he gets better. I think Janeway does a good
Janeway's a good
captaining
captain,
job. She
yeah.
seems like a captain.
She's a good captain type figure.
She's almost Kirk-like in a lot of ways.
So I have a question about when the ship got all blowed up, when the crew got all died. Oh, by the way, someone died because their fucking console exploded.
Yeah.
Like, was that
That's-
real?
and
Was
they
that a
said
joke?
that.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? It's like, well, her console.
okay.
That's
So
the only way you die in Star
So,
Trek.
so this was a problem I had. I took a note of that, because that specific line, because I think this is what we see this happen in Voyager, and I think for a specific reason. Voyager starts doing more unnecessary exposition, not just bad, poorly written exposition or whatever that shows up everywhere, but unnecessary exposition. It's not needed because you already have the information from the context of the filming, the camera angles, the characters. And this was a perfect example of that. And this continues throughout Voyager, where they walk into a room. There has just been a horrible explosion. There is a plasma fire. There are burned corpses. You don't need to have somebody say, I think they died when the concert was like. A television audience doesn't need that, but this was a show that was launching the UPN network, the United Paramount Network, and I think it was dumbed down. And I don't mean that as an insult. I think it was a strategic thing, and I don't think it's a dumb show. I think the show definitely, even this episode, deals with high level, interesting concepts to a certain degree. A little disconnected in this one, but I think that's what I think you see a lot of that extra, like blah 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 blah. We're going to explain what's happening because we're hoping that all these people are watching this brand new network.
And this was supposed to be the new main Star Trek show.
Yes.
Deep Space Nine wasn't supposed to be them. That was just supposed to be a side.
That was
thing.
hiding in the background. That was still syndicated, whereas this one was specifically on a network.
So when Janeway, so after the console exploded, and Janeway goes, the warp core is malfunctioning or whatever.
They caused a problem.
It was a
using
micro fissure.
They used technobabble to cause a problem and then used technobabble to solve the problem.
Yeah, and she used the technobabble to solve the problem. Now, what was the implication there? Was she telling the engineer how to do his job? That because there was an engineer there, or were all the engineers dead and that guy was just some ensign and she was like guiding the ensign? It wasn't very clear, but it seemed like
I don't think it was very clear
because it seemed like she's a captain. Why would she? I mean, I get she would have some knowledge of that stuff, but why is she telling everyone how the warp core works?
I believe so. I think it's a flaw in this episode. What happens is later they flesh out more later in the series. I think almost immediately they flesh out that Janeway's special deal is that she's like real science minded.
Yeah.
Whereas all the captains come from a certain perspective,
It's
right?
true.
And her perspective is she's super science lady, and that's what they were trying to emphasize. And I think they were trying to convey that with that engineering scene, but it didn't make it. Just sort of was like, this is not necessary. We already have the problem. Just let's go. We don't need this extra little bit here.
Seemed like some kind of, I guess it was some kind of more expositional stuff, but it didn't really make a lot of sense at the time.
I think that was confusing. I think there's a number of things, because what happened is they have a premise. They're starting the premise, and the premise is the ship gets trapped out over in the other side of the galaxy. All right. So how do we do that? I think that they could have gone a couple different ways, and I'm curious what you guys think about ideas you would have had. They had to invent this, the Caretaker is like sucking them in, right? That's the point. That's why it's this soliton wave or whatever in the Badlands. But could it have been something different? Could it have been, instead of the Caretaker that sucked them over, couldn't it have been they went in the wormhole, and because the wormhole aliens were like having a fight or something, decided like, fuck you guys, we're going to send you over here because we don't like what you're doing or something?
Like Deep Space Nine wormhole?
Yeah, I mean, they were already near there. I mean, I'm wondering if they could have used a different mechanism to get the Voyager and the Maquis ship lost.
I mean, what would have brought the Maquis ship to the wormhole?
Maybe they were fighting. I mean, that's the thing is you can come up with anything you want. The Maquis were always fighting around in that area anyway, because they were annoyed at the Cardassians as well as the Federation, but they were mostly fucking with the Cardassians.
I mean, I think that the basic premise of the Caretaker began like reasonably enough. It just kind of started falling apart is the problem. I mean, because like, I don't know. He made weird decisions. Like he was so busy finding these people.
Yeah, I agree.
And then he didn't. The Kazon suddenly decided to attack him, and he didn't think about that. And the whole thing about the self-destruct mechanism failing, and I don't know. And he put a fucking force field down to keep the people from getting in and out. He made the one where Kess is like, we've been told it burns our skin off. It's like, why did he put a skin burning force field down there? Like,
right, he makes a beam that like transports people across the galaxy. Like
he seems to be able to do stuff.
I mean, I guess
like they're able to do stuff, but they show up in some planet and like they almost destroy the planet, so they have to like take care of these people. But they can still all do this other wacky stuff, but they're still like.
And so it's like, yeah, they kill the people and they almost kill them off, and then they take care of them so much that they can't do anything on their own. I mean, I guess you could say
Yeah.
that's like really like a deep quandary, but I just don't think they paid attention.
It's also this is the start of a more conservative version of Star Trek, because the if there is any theme of this episode, it's don't help people too much. You don't want to help people too much because they should pull themselves up by their bootstraps and live their lives the way they're going to do it. You can interpret it different ways, but that seemed to be what was coming off of it, which is a bit of an unusual. It's not that Star Trek hasn't done that kind of thing before, but it was more overtly, I think, quasi-political here.
But as far as your point about if they could have used the wormhole and had like the wormhole aliens all mad at them, I guess the only problem with that is the whole time people would just be wondering why couldn't the Federation barter some agreement with them, because they know where the wormhole is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that could
that's a fair
interfere,
point.
I guess, with the DS9 arc, I guess, because the whole time, I mean, you could incorporate that into the DS9 arc, but that would be like confusing. I mean, this way makes it seem a little more hopeless, I guess. So,
well, okay. So another thought I had was, I got to say, I do like the ending. I do like the idea where at least Janeway voluntarily decides we're going to trap ourselves here because it's the right thing to do.
yeah, that's fair enough.
I think they could have maybe set it up the right thing to do a little bit better. It was sort of last minute and stuff. It would have been more interesting if there was a little bit more of a quandary about it or whatever. But I think they made a minor thing. It's a very minor nitpick. But earlier in the episode, right when they get pulled in, right when they get pulled over the Delta Quadrant, they react. Carrie Kim looks at his console, and the camera all pans all slow, and the music is all la, la, la. And he says, if these sensors are correct, we're over 70,000 light years from home. And it's all like, dun, 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 dun. It's taken very seriously and dramatically. I understand. This is the premise of the show. Here's the problem. Star Trek has done flinging ships across galaxies a million times before. If anything, I think it would have played much better if instead of Harry Kim being all dramatic, and then there were a couple other points where Tom Paris is being like, well, you might be, to the doctor, he was like, you might be with us for longer than you expect. All these things being like, we're going to be stuck here. That telegraphs that they're going to be stuck there. I know it's the premise of the show. I know it's how it advertised. But when you're watching it, it doesn't feel right, because in Star Trek, an actual Star Trek crew would be like totally not worried about it. They'll be like, we'll figure some shit out. Yeah. We always figure some shit out. They always do. So that's how they normally play it. And then it would really have a bigger impact at the end when it turns out they are stuck. I think it would have been better if they were all like super optimistic, like, no worries, we're going to totally sort this out. And then the end being like, oh, fuck, we're trapped. But it's the right thing to do. For some reason.
But we got this awesome ship, and we can live on that.
Yeah, it's got bio neurogel packs.
And 14 bioneural right. Yeah, that was now what I was wondering, I was actually thinking about what
it was 1994. They did, they were like,
I guess, but 90, they might have just been throwing out words,
95.
but I mean, what would make it more efficient? I was thinking of maybe midichlorians, Tetrion waves, subspace. No,
Tetrion meningitis.
Oh god, it's the worst kind. The Tetrion field is what warped them out there. Everything Tetrion, that's a thing that's supposed to be about like time or something, I think.
Yeah, they use it for various things.
But
tachyon fields are
tachyon, that's what I was thinking. It's tachyon.
That's
yeah,
like
I can't remember
thing.
the Tetrion. Yeah, tachyon's real. So those bio blanco techno things, I was imagining maybe the idea is that because it's made out of organic material, it can move around on its own, whereas...
I think reconfigure itself. I mean,
like physically reconfigure itself to put the most important bits closer to each other so it acts more efficiently.
It would be funny if it moved
something.
around of its own, if it was just slurping around. Being like, I'm going to go over here now.
Well, and they could like make friends with that.
I'm going to look in the holodeck.
They should have made friends with it. That could have been a character, is they all for some reason get zapped and turn into the live ship.
Speaking of characters, like... The sort of varied ensemble of the crew has promise for everybody, except for like the fucking Neelix.
Neelix fucking is a monster.
Fuck that shit.
Okay, how did he meet Kes? Do we find that out later? Like how they met? Do we ever?
No, I don't know if we ever find out. You're right, because that was something people talked about. I remember even at the time, Kes just came out.
Right.
Captured by Kazons is the presumption.
Right. They're not allowed to leave.
Tortured by her, yeah. Did Neelix get down there? I don't think so. It's sort of an unexplained.
I think he got down.
Were they pen pals? Did he groom her? Because there's a lot of borderline child molestery
Yeah,
stuff.
It looks
here.
a little weird, yeah.
Because she had to have been about what 3 years old.
I think
or
she's 2 or 3.
Because she only lives to be 9, right?
Yeah, they live to be 9.
Is that how they wrote her out of the show? Did she just die?
No, because
she went nuts.
Yeah, well, they wrote her out of the show by making it. The mention they make to increased mental powers and stuff. As I recall, that sort of lays fallow for until she leaves the show, and then they have her leave the show by instead of dying when she turns 9 or whatever. It's she actually her age thing accelerates, and then she evaporates and turns into some magic supermind power creature.
Weird.
So, I guess the only explanation, I guess, is maybe she snuck in and out or something. The whole line. I've been told I'm curious. I've been told it's my most
Weird line, anti-feminist line,
dangerous trait or something like that. That was an odd line.
It was odd.
It was meant to be. It was meant to be some kind of more expositional stuff, I guess. But it was weird to have.
So there's some dude and he's hanging out in space, scavenging some space trash.
and finding 2-year-old and 3-year-old girls
Yeah.
to make his mate.
And he's like,
And they'll die so that he can
weird-looking
go find
alien.
another one, and he doesn't know about beaming up and all that.
and then Natalie pointed this out. He got some clothes off the replicator, and did you see the suit that he picked?
yeah, it's all quirky style.
But Quark had better taste.
Oh, Quark had way better taste.
a lot better.
that scene. It was
Quark is put together.
It was that scene where Tuvok seemed all like overly weirded out by Neelix in that bathroom.
Very, very.
All right.
Why was he that weirded out by the whole thing? Was it because he was naked and prancing around? Or
I don't know. I will say I think that Tuvok is really one of the he's one of the better characters, especially in this pilot.
I kind of thought
he's
so, too.
awesomely Vulcan. He does a way better
Yeah.
job at being Vulcan than so many of the guest actors and even some main actors later on. He just really sort of occupies that, and they make a point that he's 100% Vulcan. It's none of this half Vulcan, half Klingon or anything. He's not fighting with anything. He's totally comfortable being Super Vulcan man.
That actor's been in Star Trek before as other characters.
Yeah, he was in Star Trek Generations, I think.
Yeah.
As a helmsman.
And he was in Spaceballs.
He ain't
right?
found shit.
Yeah, he was we ain't found shit
So-
guy in Spaceballs.
But
And he was on the Orville recently. He was awesome on the Orville.
why would the Maquis believe that a Vulcan would? I mean, how many Vulcan terrorists do you think?
Oh
there
no.
would be?
So the
Yeah,
thing
that
is
was weird.
there are Vulcan terrorists.
There are.
Yeah,
It's logical to be a terrorist.
Yeah, there's a whole. In fact, in Enterprise, they have a whole logic terrorist thing, and that's also it's continued in. There's a subset
Well, I
of
do.
Vulcan.
Logic
Now that you mention it, I vaguely remember the logic terrorists
Yeah.
in Enterprise. I vaguely do remember
And in
that.
Discovery, that comes up again with Sarek, that he gets fucked up by some logic cult terrorists. Where they think dealing with humans or anybody or Klingons or anybody else is wrong because you should stick to. They're basically a xenophobic, Vulcan nationalist group.
And I guess the way that the normal Vulcans look at them is it's not like an example of different people can come to different conclusions based on logic. So logic is fallible. Their conclusion would just be what? Oh, well, they were just being illogical. They say they're being logical, but they're just being illogical.
Yeah.
Clearly, they're just being illogical.
And what's interesting is you have a thread of Star Trek fandom that I again, in most cases, I think is well intentioned, but they miss one of the key points in TOS. The Vulcan character, Spock's character, was not meant to be somebody you follow or whatever. Just like McCoy. McCoy and Spock were supposed to be two sides of the same coin, extreme versions. And the point was that if you only follow logic or if you only follow emotion, either one is problematic. Kirk combines the two by serving as the locus, and he can combine reason and humanity.
Right.
to come up
McCoy
with
was the
decisions.
superhuman one.
Yeah, McCoy was
versus
superhuman.
Spock's.
Which is,
not human.
which was the doctor. There was a line in there. He goes, "This is a sick bay, not a conference room." That had
Yeah.
to have been like a wink.
Yeah, that was definitely a wink.
Except
And
because
it
he's a robot, he's talking about an object as opposed to McCoy, who was talking about a person. But I
Yeah.
don't know. But anyway, but yeah,
But Tuvok, I think, I think he does such a good job in that.
And you haven't seen a Vulcan security officer yet.
That's true
You've
too.
seen-
Yeah.
You've seen a Klingon security officer, and that totally makes sense to everybody now. But like a Vulcan security officer, you don't see that.
Yeah, but they would be presumably good at
Probably,
investigating and
yeah.
like sussing out details and
Yeah.
things. But and again, we mentioned Janeway. I thought her characterization that she has this I guess a boyfriend and a dog, and she likes
Yeah, right.
she's what kind of dog is that? That's an Afghan, isn't it?
It's what I don't
I think
remember.
those are Afghans, and they're really dumb dogs.
I never saw this episode when the show was
Isn't that
on.
isn't that the dog that
They show a picture of it near the end.
doesn't Beverly Crusher get turned into a dog by Q or something? And it's like I think it's one of those dogs too. I think
Oh, it
might
would
be
make
the
sense.
same
She kind of
breed
looks like
dog.
one of those. She looks like that or a greyhound or something.
I had never seen this one,
But the
so
hair makes her like an Afghan.
I missed, but when the show was on before, I'd only seen a few episodes, and I didn't see that, so I didn't know that she had like a boyfriend and like there was other stuff going on. In her
And
life.
that's a problem because they don't really. It does come up later. The boyfriend does come up, but not consistently enough. You'd think it would be something she'd be more, especially at the beginning of the series.
Yeah.
It comes up. I mean, but
But Neelix. So Neelix, a fucking asshole, right?
Let's get back to this
it's
guy.
like a liar and a rummager.
Yeah, he takes him to this
A
planet.
child molester.
He's like, I'd like some water, and that's obviously like
been
he doesn't have
scrounging
water.
around for ass.
He needs a ton of water. Obviously, that's such a great, wonderful thing.
And then
they're
he
like-
shoots the fucking water.
And he shoots the
It's
water.
like, oh, they could just make more. I'll
Yeah.
shoot it.
And when they get back, he gets Kess. He's like, "Well, we'll tell you where to go. We have what I need. I'm just gonna get the fuck out of
Yeah.
here now. I'm gonna
Yeah.
bone out, And it's like, you fucking asshole. They're giving you a shitload of water, and you lied to them, and you won't even like. You lie to someone, you at least, if you're cool, you go, my bad, I'll show you the real one. But you got water out of it, and you lied to him, and then you were just ready to fucking ditch him.
Neelix is a bad person.
You want me to work for you.
But then-
you should give me a job and I'll work for you.
I'll cook you some ogle block.
I'm what you needed, but you never knew you needed.
Aglabosk.
Anglabusk.
But then inexplicably, when they were leaving and Paris goes back to save Chakotay, inexplicably Neelix is somehow turns noble. Somehow there's a turn there. Because like he wanted to ditch him, and then later on he's like, "I'll go with
He's like,
you."
"I'll go with you."
It's like before he was ready to ditch him, but
Make
then
that
somewhere
3 to
along
beam up.
somewhere along the line, you don't hear from him much while they're on that planet doing that weird shit, and suddenly he makes a fucking turn. And that's the thing, is these sort of forced turns, these forced characterizations where they're telling you should feel like this because we're telling you that this is what's happening.
And again,
why is it happening?
Again, this is an example of how the pilot can really set the tone to a series. In the Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint, it's entertaining. It's a pretty good pilot, but there are clearly flaws and character differences that they then work to evolve away from and they correct over time. But in Voyager, it really lays down this foundation of not seeming to care too much about the consistency of the character, even within the span of an episode, but certainly in different episodes. And it becomes an issue later where Voyager, in order to tell the story they want to tell, they seem to be real fast and loose with how the characters actually react. So I think it's harder to get into the characters for precisely that reason, because you're confused as to why are they brave this episode and the next episode they're a coward or whatever, or they make two different episodes in a row. Janeway will take completely different perspectives on the Prime Directive, for example, and it's after a while it gets sort of tiring because it's like, okay, I guess I'm seeing this story and you're just going to have the people act however it makes sense to tell the story you want to tell, as opposed to the story that the characters want to participate in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty common thing for people to people to express the opinion of, like, it doesn't matter if something has superpowers. It doesn't matter how crazy something is that someone does. There just has to be like a set of rules to it,
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, and it doesn't matter. It could be something simple like someone goes left all the time and then one day they go right for no reason. There's no rules to that. It's like easy to do, but it's just like, why did you show us something without reason? So that's just, it goes back to the characterization issue of what do the characters really mean later on in the show.
Well, so we've agreed Neelix is fucked up, and the Tom Paris stuff is weird because he sort of changes.
You know what's funny about Tom Paris? His dad was an admiral.
Yeah.
And Natalie was like, they had a male admiral. because like
She was
the
used to
only-
all the
there's-
Admiral Nechayev and stuff like that.
they're all almost all women unless it's like a member of like the TOS cast that's like comes back as an admiral. Like
Yeah,
there's
no, they have a lot
there-
of
there-
women
the
admirals.
women, that's all these cranky old ladies are admirals in TNG.
Oh yeah, no, there's like the drumhead with Admiral Satie. She's a fucked up old lady.
Which is why like it's good that they show that there's a female captain because they're not just skipping over captain to get and commodore to get to admiral. Like
Well,
they
what's
got to be captains before they're admirals.
well in Paris's thing? When Harry finally finds out what's going on with Paris,
When Harry met Paris,
when Pee-Pee met Poopy, yeah.
nobody chooses my friends for me, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, but everyone, including the guy, is saying he's a shithead.
Yeah, right. He just kind of like, it was just so reactionary. Like it's just like, no, you don't. No, you don't choose your dog.
I can be friends with whomever I want.
Yeah, it's like, I'll just tell you what to do. You say the opposite. But yeah, when Paris says the problem was pilot error, 3 dead officers. So he was referring to a different thing than the whole like TNG
Unrelated, yeah.
Starfleet.
Same actor, but unrelated.
So this guy's a
Oh,
total
that's right,
piece of
yeah.
shit.
Yes.
So he's a total piece of
Yes.
shit. Total piece of shit. Well, I mean, he's the same character.
Oh, he's
a different character.
Oh, he's
in
a different
He's in the
character?
Wesley episode with the
yes,
with the
actor,
the pilots.
So here's what happened.
I know it's the same actor. I always assumed it was the same character.
And here's the reason why. Because this is the behind the scenes hilarious. This is the problem we have with copyright. Well, maybe not problem. That's a matter of perspective.
I mean, I guess I don't remember the guy's name in TNG, but
His name was Lucaro, I think.
Okay. Wow, I feel
Ensign
stupid.
Lucaro.
That's the name of a miscreant.
It's the same actor. They like
Right.
the actor. The original idea was obviously we have this actor. He did a great job. The character is a perfect setup for this. Honorable, but dishonored himself, but then sort of like re-honored himself by taking all the blame, even though he caused the death of this student. Brilliant, and that was going to be the character that became the character of Paris. Here's the problem. If they use that character, every single Voyager of episode would have to pay a royalty to the writer of that TNG episode.
oh, interesting.
Because that's how it works. If you originate a character in a script, you get royalties anytime that character is used in the future. Right? And so this comes up a lot, especially in Star Trek, but other places as well, where they want to go back, but they can't use the same character because then they're going to have to pay
Now,
every single episode.
That's one of those things where I'm kind of on the fence copyright wise because on one hand, if you create something like a character, like
Yes.
you should get paid, but on the same hand, it does kind of stifle creativity in that sense.
potentially,
So-
but they could. Here's the fact.
So
though.
I lean towards giving royalties to the person who created the character. The
So
only
here-
thing is it's not inconsistent though because the person wrote the rest of the script and like what every time. So if they ever reference that they're not allowed to go to warp whatever because it
No,
wears
because it's
down
not.
the carpet
It's not
of
about.
the
It's
space
specific.
time.
It's specific to characters.
No, right.
with-
Well,
and I think even
well,
characters
right.
with lines.
Well, that's my point is it's specific to characters and characters with lines, but then why not other ideas created? I guess but my point is like I agree
And,
with
you
giving
know, it could-
royalties, but where it seems arbitrary where they draw those lines.
It could be because I don't know the specific details on how that breaks down. I just know that was the issue there. But we have to remember that Paramount simply could have paid that guy. Like they could have paid the royalty. It probably was not huge. It was and maybe that's the writers when they were originally putting together the story thought that it would not be an issue because why is it an issue? Okay, we pay this guy a little royalty. Big deal. It's a good character. We're using his character. But then maybe the suits were like, no, we're not going to do it. And here's the reason why it's fucked up. Yes, the copyright's meant to protect that guy, and so he gets a little piece anytime they use that character in the future. Okay. But that's not what happened. What happened is they didn't pay him and they created an identical character
right.
and used the same actor so that even somebody like you was fooled into effect. And they didn't do much to differentiate it. Yes, he has a different name, but the character background, the vibe of it is clearly very similar.
Right.
And especially after the first pilot, in the pilot, they try to make him a little bit more like an asshole, like you're saying, but really, really rapidly, he reverts right back to that kind of honorable guy willing to take some risks and chances to for his own people. But I mean,
and he's a pilot.
yeah.
And it was a pilot accident. And
and by the way,
didn't come forth with it. Right
by the
away.
way, when they're on the ship, right? And not even when they're on the ship. When Janeway is basically explaining the deal to Paris. I think it's before everything went down
In New Zealand?
No, it was before that. I
the
think
penal colony in New Zealand.
penal. I know, I
Yeah.
laughed when they said penal.
Penal.
No, but she's just explaining the deal to Paris, and the deal seems to be you're currently in jail for murder. Or for being a terrorist, not even for murder. You got out of the trouble for the murders. I shouldn't say murders. The deaths that were caused by you. You got out of that, and then you joined a terrorist organization. Totally different debate whether that's a fair moniker for that organization or not. But nevertheless, you knew that you would get in trouble. If you got caught, and now you're in jail. Now they're offering you this deal where you don't have to be in jail for a while and will get a good word put in when it comes to like parole time. And then Janeway explains that you'll be an observer, and he's like, "What the fuck? I'm a pilot." It's like, no, you're gonna pilot the new experimental like super ship. You're gonna take you out of prison for 2 weeks. Like, this was not intended to be a permanent position. It was like, we need you to find this. This is a specific thing. We need to find this ship that our buddies on, and they're terrorists. We want to go get them. You're gonna help us for a couple weeks, and then you're gonna come back here. And he wants to pilot the ship during that. It was. I think that's an example. That's bad writing, if you ask me. It just is sort of like weird. They were trying to convey his character as like really gung ho about flying. Okay, you can do that in other ways than have him look like a moron. Like, oh, you're gonna let me out of prison and not let me fly the fucking ship? It's a fucking military vessel.
Yeah, it's like if they went, like nowadays, if they went to like Leavenworth and got somebody and was like, here, we need you to fly this super jet.
Super
So
jet.
you're not going to do that.
So okay, we've gone over most of the characters. Anything else on Janeway? Because I was kind of also curious to talk about some of the side characters, especially the ones that died in the first episode, because I think there's some funny stuff there.
She at the very end of the episode, she gave some good reactions when I'm jumping ahead a little bit when Janeway and not Janeway, when Neelix and Kess all wanted to join up the ship. She was all like, "Yeah, sure." I thought she gave some pretty good. I thought she gave some pretty, entertaining facial.
She's a great
expressions.
actress.
Like, just kind of like she was like, "Okay," I thought that was pretty expressive.
But again, there's where the problem was: is they wanted that cute moment, and it was a cute moment, but at the cost of the character. in that they presented this character, especially at the beginning, very strong.
That's true.
She's all like, "Call me captain," which is it's not a stick up your ass, but it's like a little bit. And there's that whole like weird. Is it more feminist, or is it more or less feminist to not want to be called sir and to be preferred to call ma'am?
Yeah,
I was confused at what point they were making there.
And it was also weird because Harry. Yeah, I was confused by that. And then why did they tried to drill something home because Harry called her ma'am, and he's like, "Oh yeah," like you just said, he's like, "I prefer to be called captain," whatever. But then, and she's like, "Maybe that works in a crunch, but then you can call me captain," blah blah blah. And then later on, when they board the ship, he says, "Yes, ma'am," again, and she's like, "We're not in a crunch yet, Mr. Kim."
I'll let you know when it's crunch
I'll let you know
time.
when. Yeah, exactly. I'll let you know when it's crunch time. It's like, why did they do that? I don't know why they did that.
I mean,
I think
again,
she was just goofing.
But then later on, but what was interesting, almost as a throwaway, I guess they meant. I don't know if they meant to do this, but at the very end, it was the shot wasn't even on Paris, but like she's like, "Paris, bring us 400 kilometers away from the Ray ship or whatever," and he's like, "Yes, ma'am." And so
she didn't.
was that official? Were they saying it was crunch time? But like the shot wasn't on him, so for a show that's trying to be obvious,
that doesn't sound like crunch time if your shot's not on.
yeah,
it
right.
seemed like everything was fine.
And it seemed like a throwaway line, like it was just like, yeah, let's go. But it was like it seemed like they were trying to make the point of, see, Paris is smooth. Paris is smooth and knows what to say, and Harry's a nerd.
Or maybe she's
know,
just
but like- but-
dude, he's a nerd.
she might be
Tight ass.
Harry Paris knows when to say "man," but Harry doesn't because he's a dork.
It could be a product of institutional racism, where she simply accepts a different mode of behavior from a white person than from a non-white person.
I'm sure.
I
Harry,
mean,
why
maybe
aren't you
not in
playing
the
your
Star Trek
clarinet?
universe, but maybe in the writers' universe, because it's now that you point that out, it really kind of sticks out in a weird way. But no, so the thing with what's weird with Janeway is, in some scenes, super not only competent, but really rational, reasoned, and seemingly more so than a lot of captains, a little bit more obsessed with the whole doing things by the book. And, she's like more about that. And that's true in a lot of other episodes too. But on the other hand,
Even more than Picard, yeah.
she gets fooled by a little rummaging guy, a little monster, creepy dude who tricks them and
Got weird hair.
Good sand scrub.
and then gets bullied by him into somehow having him stay on the ship when he could be a spy for all we know.
yeah.
He's like
That's
some kind of
weird.
space gypsy or something.
When they go down and they're dealing with they see that the Kazon are there, right? And
The
they say-
Kazon Ugla?
yeah, and she says, what's the deal with these people?" And Neelix is, first of all, Neelix lied and didn't tell them they'd be there. But beyond that, what Neelix is saying and their behavior seems problematic, and yet they walk up there and then they just take their phasers away. It was a very weird, incompetent thing where why would they let them do that? And then what really puzzled me was that Janeway, without a moment's hesitation, beams down 2 large canisters of water to these people who she doesn't know. She doesn't know the political dynamic in the area. She previously was all about the Prime Directive, but she has no idea what these people's situation is, whether they're spacefaring, warp, whatever. And not only that, what she did know, what little information she had just been given by Neelix, which was basically he described Mad Max. He said there are different tribes, and one tribe has food, and one tribe has water, and then so she's immediately going to give one tribe a massive amount of water that they can then. It's going to totally potentially upset the balance in this area.
That's an interesting point. Like I didn't think about that.
And she didn't think twice about it.
and then that
Neelix,
motherfucker shoots it.
yeah, he shoots it, and I mean that's the smartest thing because he's knows it's no good to give these people. Well, I mean, there's an argument to say that it's an appropriate thing to do, but there was no meditation on. There was no commenting on. Ooh, this is we should be careful about. Do we do this? To curry favor?
because the Prime Directive, right? You're supposed to obey at all times, but of course sometimes it gets the gray areas. But it doesn't mean you have to go throw it all out the window. Meaning they were thrown into this scenario, so they had to fuck. The Prime Directive was a little bit fucked up at that point. But you're right about if they suddenly introduce water to this one warring tribe, it's like you still have to try to salvage what you can of the Prime Directive, and
absolutely.
just going in there and fucking up the whole balance of power is definitely problematic.
And here's a bigger problem. What exactly was their plan? What were they getting? They didn't get anything.
Yeah, right.
What was the plan?
Were they supposed to get passage, or they
got Kess, but that was Neelix's plan.
Yeah, they should have probably transported out of there right when shit was getting shady. She should have been like, "Get us out of here. We need to talk
saw
with this
some
guy."
monster people skulking about with weird foreheads and hair. That apparently, by the way, was in all of Star Trek. It took the longest to put on the Kazon heads.
Weird.
Yeah, because
did they
the
have
hair.
to, they had to tie ribbons or something in their hair?
They had to tie hundreds of ribbons, and the hair was really complicated, multi-piece thing. So it took forever to do it.
I wonder if they took it out at the end of every day, or if they
had to wear it.
Well, no, because it wasn't in their hair; it was in wigs. So they could do some of it ahead of time. But
sorry, that was dumb.
But the unlike other, I was listening to an interview with one of the people who actually played a Kazon. It might have been the guy who played the Kazon in this episode. He played some stuff on Deep Space Nine and a couple. He's one of those actors who shows up a few times on Star Trek.
Are you talking about the leader?
I think it might have been the
Kinda
leader
like
guy.
the
The leader guy is Gavin O'Hurley.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
He's one of those.
He was in Willow. He was the other he was the guy with the army in Willow. He had the beard.
That's right.
But he's
And he was apparently, people of an older generation will understand this. I don't get it, but I've heard about this. In Happy Days, they had an older brother who was maybe on the show a little bit, and he was always off at school. And eventually in Happy Days, they just forget about that older brother, and he's not even in there. But his name was Chuck Cunningham.
Chuck Cunningham.
And Gavin
that's
O'Hurley,
weird.
he played that dude.
Oh, what's up, Chuck?
I just like saying.
And his
O'Hurley.
dad was an actor, and
Chuck
he played
Buck.
the old guy in RoboCop.
Which dad? Whose dad?
Gavin O'Hurley's dad.
Wait, which Gavin O'Hurley's dad wasn't in that episode of
No.
Voyager? Oh.
No. I don't believe he was in any Star Trek, but he was in RoboCop.
Well, I was trying to say earlier, but the joke's passed. But I'm going to say it anyways. It was kind of like he's one of those return Star Trek actors, like that jump to conclusions Matt guy.
Yes.
That guy too. Those guys was
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
guy. There's a bunch of guys in there.
yeah.
But so I think
So they were.
That
on
guy
the
was
planet.
in some Star Trek.
Oh yeah, you were talking to the guy. They were talking about I stupidly thought, what did they just put it in their hair and take it out every day? You're like, no, they're fucking wigs.
I just think it was they were more complicated than some of the other
And you were saying it was like an interview with like that guy.
It wasn't
over-
just a nose or something.
It was some guy. He was just talking about how long it took and compared to the other ones. But the point being is that it's a plot flaw in that it's not really clear what their plan is going down there, and then they are surprised by the Kazon, yet that Janeway clearly already had something set up about water, so Neelix must have told her, like, get 2 big tanks of water ready to beam down with your magical beaming thing I didn't know about an hour ago, but now I do, and so I've developed this whole plan to rescue my girlfriend, who I didn't look like I was trying to rescue her at the time that you guys found me. I was actually looking at garbage, but now I'm here and telling her, I told you I'd find you. And why does he know her in the first place, as we already discussed? It's confusing. And again, I think it's an example of they just are writing stuff to get to where they want to go, which is partly, the underground stuff with the presumably very X-Files inspired alien abduction vibe, which was very big at the time in the mid-90s. And all that, the needle going into the belly was straight out of fucking Fire in the Sky. Do you remember that movie?
I never saw it, but I remember ads for it. I vividly remember like seeing ads for that shit.
You guys, anyone out there listening, I don't know if it's on Netflix or where. It might even be hard to find on the torrent, on BitTorrent or whatever. But find Fire in the Sky somehow and watch it. It's not a good movie. It's not a good movie, but it's an interesting movie, and it's a movie that is referenced directly or indirectly by a number of other sources. But the best part about the best memory I have of seeing Fire in the Sky in the theaters is, the theater's full of people and everyone's just looking to have a nice afternoon with some funny alien business, alien abduction, get freaked out a little bit. And the previews play, the lights get dark, the logos come up, and then right as the movie's about to start, it says, based on a true story. And the entire audience erupts in laughter. And then that sort of set the tone for the rest of the movie.
That wasn't the Twin Peaks movie. That was Fire Walk with Me.
That was Fire Walk with Me, which is a legitimately disturbing movie. It's not as disturbing as the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, which is a highly disturbing television program. But that was pretty bad.
So, yeah, that whole scene where they were sticking the needles in them, I feel like there was some more stuff in that they must have cut or something, because it didn't make a lot of sense. First of all, like, there's another way this alien Caretaker is sort of like inept. He brought them in, put them in this hologram place, but he made the the Sporocystian life signs people, which because that's what Harry Kim found on his tricorder, Sporocystian life signs. But they put it in this barn. Like, how was you already got this hologram world around you? Did he not predict that they were going to be able to, like, how are you going to navigate in a hologram over to the place in the real world?
Yeah.
Now, but
we're not ready for you yet.
So, yeah, and when they said we're not ready for you yet, why did she then go on to show them all the people who had the needles in them? Why did she show them that? Why did she bring up the veil or whatever it's called and show them behind the scenes, like, oh, here's all these people knocked out.
This will answer your question.
Yeah, and why are we answering your question anyways? And so what happened then? Then the next scene is some weird, confusing scene where Janeway has a needle in her head, and then Harry has this needle under his head, and then
in the bellies, they put it in the belly.
Or the bellies, or yeah, you're right, in the bellies, and then they get the next scene, the shot or scene or whatever is them transported back in the Voyager with Harry's missing. Now, when she lifted the veil and showed them, when the gatekeeper or whatever, the fucking caretaker, like, lifted the veil and showed...
made Jesse lunch out.
And showed them all that shit. At that point, were they knocked out yet? Or was that pre-knockout? And how did they knock them out? It just... showed them all the people.
3 days passed, man. They said it.
So yeah, so while they were
said it.
while they were in the hologram, were they yet knocked out at that point, or were they?
I'm not clear.
It's not. It's very confusing.
And the doctor dudes are like, "Can anybody tell me what just happened?"
Yeah,
they're all like mean to him and rude to him.
Yeah, they always are. Like, anyways, the point is it's all very confusing because I don't know if they're knocked out enough while they're in the hollow world. And then when they show them all the people knocked out, why do they show them the people knocked out? And then if they then get knocked out at that point after they see all the other people knocked out, how did they get knocked out? All of a sudden, it just switches to the next scene of them having needles in them. It implies that the hologram world is kind of like the Matrix, where the Matrix, you're in the hollow world, and then when you wake up, you woke up, in this weird world. Is that what they did? Is they woke up in a weird world? I don't understand what was going on there. I don't know why they chose that scene. They said, "Oh yes, the caregiver like goes through all of our banks and finds things that are relevant to us, and that's how they create our
goes
hollow
through our
world."
bank records. It goes SunTrust, USAA.
What was it? Wachovia? Werfluff.
It checks your credit.
But
all 3 credit scores.
Here's another part where he just
TransUnion,
where he just the
Equifax,
where
whatever the third one is.
where the care lever like finds these like memories that make a hollow world for.
Did you say care lever instead of caretaker?
Caregiver.
Caretaker.
The caremonger.
The gatekeeper.
The gatekeeper. Like he like creates these memories based upon he creates this hollow world based upon these records they have of some old timey bluegrass
or their brains or something.
Country picnic.
It's weird.
But couldn't they have picked something more like
contemporary, something more contemporary to modern Starfleet?
Yeah. So like the way they were doing it, he's so inept. It made it look so jarring. They're like, what is this stupid world? Why did they pick that stupid world? It should have been something that was more relevant to him. In DS9, it made sense because it was all confusing in DS9 when he was in the.
It was meant to confuse you.
It was meant to be confusing and jarring because it was probing all of his shit and all. That was understandably confusing. This was just confusing for the sake of being.
It was meant to be. Here's the thing.
There was no point to it.
It was again. It's the writing issue where they were thinking of ideas instead of characters. Instead of developing the characters and then having them interact and
That's
say
exactly it.
What environments would make these characters react in interesting ways.
Precisely.
They said we want an X-Files scene that has alien abduction to creep people out. We want a creepy Twin Peaksy style down homesy folksy scene, even though it makes no sense because if they were pulling it from these people's memories or whatever to be what's comfortable, it's going to be different depending on the person. So doing something like in Deep Space Nine where everyone's actually seeing and experiencing a different environment would have been interesting. If it's pulling from their brains.
They just saw a bunch of people in like Indiana or something.
Yeah, right.
And it wouldn't. And by the way, there are plenty of people on that Starfleet crew that would probably not, in fact, be comfortable in that environment. They'd probably be kind of freaked out and nervous because these are ancient horror people. Like it's the start of a horror movie, kind of. That's the vibe they wanted to go for, and it was a cool vibe. And that's the thing that keeps happening in Voyager.
There's a banjo.
There's a lot of cool vibes, but they don't amount to anything. They're just cool.
Yeah, like what that whole southern scene was completely irrelevant.
And the main motherfucker's playing banjo.
Yeah, that was cool.
And
you gotta watch out for that.
And if your argument is, he only grabbed what he could, he doesn't know everything about them. Well, he knows enough about them to make a very consistent sort of like southern country kind of like, old school scene. Like,
Some kind of old America.
Like it wasn't anything crazy like, you had a banjo player here and a dragon over there and like some kind of guy masturbating in the corner.
Well, that was happening in the barn.
There wasn't any
that's why she
like,
didn't want to go. That's really the reason.
Weird Vulcan landscape or
right, exactly.
some kind of
right.
Yeah, well, and it's
Klingon Targ or something.
And it's something they do a lot better on Discovery is that it's always been a problem in Star Trek, sometimes for practical reasons, but not even that. Is there's a homogeneity to the crew. To a lot of these crews, they tend to be primarily human with a few token characters. And TNG and Deep Space Nine was great because Deep Space Nine there was all sorts of different people just by definition. And in Discovery, what's been good is that it's a Starfleet ship, but they have like lots of different, not only different types of humans in terms of different ethnic makeups, but also they have actual different crazy looking aliens and robot people and stuff. They have a variety of people. On Voyager, I noticed that when they're all standing there. It's like, there's all very similar kind of group of people there. You don't have any, Andorians or anything like that.
Well, yeah. DS9, there's got to be a name for this style in shows where the hospital shows do this all the time. This is basically why you make a hospital show, is you have a stationary sort of place, and you get to have characters that come and leave because it's a hospital, And that's what DS9 is. It's the same thing where you've got your crew there, and then people come and go. You can have someone crazy
like Gullah Vec, who's in this episode, too.
Oh yeah, Golivek, right?
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
So you're stationary and have people coming in and out, but yeah, Voyager, they really, I mean, shows like that are more difficult, I guess. I mean, TNG has to do it too, but they did or original series obviously did a better job. But yeah, the Voyager crew is pretty vanilla, and they really meet that many interesting characters down the line? Maybe here and there.
I think it's very rare. I mean, the funny thing is the later introduction of 7 of 9, even though it was ostensibly to boost ratings with a big boobs and attractive woman, it actually turned into a pretty darn interesting character and created a dynamic. They were able to do a lot of stuff with.
And
the
they
other
added her
characters.
because like the Kess person left. Right?
Yeah, it was around the same time. Some people say they fired her because they're going to add this new person. But I mean, I'm pretty sure the Kess character was intended to be the sort of sexy character in a way, but that was problematic.
Yeah, she's
I think.
all right.
Yeah, I think it became problematic. A, because she's 2 years old, and B,
It's got weird
the
hair.
actress was being weird and causing some.
She was
ruckus.
in SLC Punk.
Wow.
She played what's his name's girlfriend?
Yeah.
The
Not
guy,
not Annabeth Gish, but
the guy that played
Annabeth Gish is good.
the doctor was
She was in
in
X-Files.
the Wonder Years. He was the coach on the Wonder Years.
Which guy?
The guy that plays the doctor.
Oh yeah,
the
you're right.
hologram.
Yeah. I remember he was a Lipschitz or something.
He's very good
cut
on
lip.
Cut lip. Yeah, that's right.
the doctor. Are you talking about the original doctor or the doctor?
The hologram
The
doctor.
hologram. Yeah, he's
Robert Picardo.
Yeah, Rob Picardo's. He's good in a lot of other stuff. He was in The Burbs as a garbage man.
Wow.
This
This says he was in Stargate television show.
He's
He
on
was-
the
he was in
Orville.
China Beach.
the original Doctor was some kind of Kevin Nealon looking motherfucker.
I know he was poor man's Kevin Nealon. I was trying to look him up to see what I was trying to figure out his name. I don't think I found it.
He didn't like Paris too much. He was like
No,
That
well,
was
I mean,
funny.
I was going to note that I think they had a trouble setting up the Paris character. The actor Robert Duncan McNeil, he does a great job.
He was on Colic Prime.
And I don't even think he needs to do any. I don't even think they needed to do all that other stuff because it kind of it made the first officer and the doctor look like kind of shady assholes. I know we're supposed to look at it as they're trying to help this new young ensign, but it came off as like I guess they died anyway, so who cares? But they didn't seem like really cool people. So you're kind of thinking Janeway is like hiring. They clearly don't have faith in Janeway because
Right.
Janeway personally picked this person,
Right.
and the first officer and the chief medical officer are effectively going behind her back, saying like, "Yeah, don't help this guy out."
Yeah, totally.
The captain likes him, but fuck that.
Yeah, that is it is sketchy.
And the first officer gave me a real kind of Jim will fix it child molester vibe. There's a couple weird things with the first officer. Not nothing against the actor. Just the character was weird. There was that, and then just something about him. And then there was that really weird scene where when the shit goes down, when they get sucked in, through that
Oh,
thing.
he all like jumps up in the air or something.
And he all runs
Oh, yeah.
forward in a weird
Yeah.
way, and then it explodes. He's all
Yeah,
like,
and it's like-
"Ah!"
He died
Yeah.
because when they said brace yourself, he was running
He
around.
didn't brace himself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
running
didn't.
around.
and he was previously bracing himself. He's like, "Oh, brace yourself! Fuck you! I'm gonna let go. I don't respect a woman
Jump up in
captain."
Yeah.
That's why he died.
That's why he did.
And then they had to get Chakotay.
Okay, so I think a couple observations about this compared to some other pilots was this is another Star Trek pilot that involves an analog for God.
That's what I was gonna say. I was
Right?
gonna say like the caretaker. I was like, oh, the caretaker is the government. He's got all this secret shit going on, and he tells you what's good for you, and you follow him blinded. But then I was like, no, the caretaker's God.
Yeah, because they interpret. They're like, he doesn't talk to us. We just
Yeah.
guess what he wants.
Yeah.
that's God. And it's wormhole aliens, fucking encounter at Farpoint with Q, and then on TOS, the Where No Man Has Gone Before was a fucking. The guy turns into a god, and that's the whole problem. I mean, it's a much more interesting story, in my opinion. More philosophically interesting tale there. And then it's a climate change thing because they're basically talking about it's depressing. They're talking about global warming back in 1995. I know it goes back further than that. I'm just making the point that they're like, aren't we clever? We're
right.
working global climate change into a storyline, and here we are. 25 years later, it's like but that's like the Telosians. They also had a climate problem that forced them underground. I mean, it's a very similar setup with the Telosian setup.
And I was thinking, and there's something about the Telosian that I found, even though once again they were given about arguably as much backstory as the Ocampo were. something about the Telosians seemed more fascinating, I guess. There seemed to be...
I think we could relate to it more. It was more human.
Yeah, it was more human, and this idea of they found an addiction in going into people's minds and doing that shit, and there was just something really fascinating about that. And maybe, I don't know if it just wasn't the focus of Voyager, but I just felt like the Ocampa just came off as really like plastic and empty.
Yeah.
You know, with the only passing line being like, we used to have telepathy. Like that wussy, the guy who's like, you shouldn't do that. That leader guy who came in and was speaking telepathically.
Yeah.
And she's like, don't speak telepathically. They can't do it. And I was like, why did they randomly do it? But then I was like, well, I guess that's just to show that they used to be smart. But that's the only window into anything about them that we have. You know, the only other description is like the caretaker saying, "Oh, they're children," but they're only children because he made them that way. But anyways, so yeah, you were saying that the Telosians, they had this similar vibe in a certain sense, but there's something about the Telosians.
They have mental powers, and they live underground because of environmental catastrophe. There's differences, of course; it's not identical. And in the case of the Ocampa, their powers receded once they went underground. Whereas with the Telosians, they describe them getting better because they were stuck underground, so they didn't have much to do. So they were able to like really practice their mind bone.
Yeah, I guess the Ocampa, the power receded because they were given everything they needed.
Yeah, because of their welfare queens. Again, that seems to be what the kind of underlying message is. Is like, oh, you don't want to. Yeah, you want to be nice, just but don't help them too much. You don't want to become dependent.
Yeah, right.
We're not in favor of this dependency culture. Look what's going to happen. If you don't give poor people too much money, they won't get the opportunity to gain magical mental kinetic powers.
So, I think that the idea of sort of the story, that's what its thing is. The story is there, but there's a lot at stake. That's the thing. There's a lot at stake in Voyager, but it's hard to care that much. And it just goes once again into like the rules of characterization is all over the place. You're told you're supposed to care about something, but why do I care about these things? I guess I'm supposed to. A whole civilization is at stake, but there's nothing really. You don't really get a good relatable vibe. You're supposed to get a relatable vibe to these Ocampa, I guess, but it just doesn't come across that way. The Telosians come across as, even though they're assholes, they come across as a little more relatable somehow. It doesn't have that awesome. So, and then like where No Man Has Gone Before, the story on that was fine, but the strength in that story was in the character, just like the character study, I guess. I don't want to sound like lame by saying character study, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, but like
character study's fucking kick ass, man.
It makes this podcast sound better when you talk like
character
that.
study, tight.
Yes.
So you see this guy.
Use the word longitudinal somehow.
And
add that into your analysis at some point.
Fartonomics. But
He ruined it.
but you see this guy sort of like,
You see
this guy is in God. You don't.
Yeah, we can't. It's not funny anymore.
No, it's hard to do.
He's in jail.
Okay, I'm just saying. So you see this
He
guy
raped all those women.
You see this guy progress to become a god, and then you have like the people around him. The whole idea of like, oh, this guy's going to be an asshole, but should we judge him yet for being an asshole? Because he's not an asshole yet, blah, blah, blah. So you get more of that character stuff. DS9, you get all this sort of like character interaction mixed with these sort of societal motives and all these kinds of things. It's pretty a lot at stake. TNG, you don't get a lot, but you know that these characters are going to be rad later. And that's why it's also hard to judge this pilot against TNG's pilot, because I know what TNG becomes and I know what Voyager becomes. So, but also TNG had it going for it. It's like Star Trek's back, so that was kind of acceptable for that. I'm trying to see, TNG, had more lovable characters that they introduced, I guess. And like the Voyager characters, within the episode broke all of their premises, except for the basic things like, I'm half Klingon. I'm mad sometimes.
The ending bit where I've decided we're going to do this as a crew. We're just going to we're going to do the Starfleet way, which, again, you can see the context the show was produced in, the assumption that the Starfleet way is the right way, because Janeway just said, I've determined we're going to do this as a unified crew, and, by the way, that means the Starfleet way, not a hybrid way. Right? Mm-hmm. And when really, I think you take the same premise, almost the same first episode, but instead of ending it that way, where essentially most of the plot threads other than getting home have now been resolved, you have multi-season not even arcs. It doesn't have to be Deep Space Nine style arcs even, but that periodic character development where B'Elanna Torres and where Chakotay is not immediately the first officer, where maybe Tuvok is, and it's got to be wrestling around a little bit. Again, this is something they've done in Discovery and in a much more interesting way, in that there's more back and forth, and we don't know exactly it's what's going to happen, and if anything, things are maybe left unresolved for too long there. But anyway, that was my primary point being you don't end that way. Instead, you end in, all right, man, we just went through some shit. And then literally end the episode with, okay, now we've resolved that problem that had a temporary truce.
Yeah.
Now we're together. We still have the basic problem of having to get home, but we're not. Like, we're still terrorists, and you're still Starfleet, and we still have problems with each other.
Right, because all this really sets up is the premise of, we're far away, we need to get home, which is very simplistic, very straightforward, and that's fine that's the goal. But yeah, the purpose of it is then how do you make that interesting? Well, they're relying on the idea, well, they'll meet a lot of cool shit along the way and we'll figure that out later. Oh, and by the way, they set up this enemy that we can bring them back whenever we need to in the Kazon or whatever. And so, but what they didn't do is, like you just said, they didn't have an ongoing motivation beyond just go home. It's like, yeah, great, go home. That's what you need to do. But what are you going to do in the meantime? And what you need is, like a group of characters that somehow can sort of interact with each other, and they erased all that with the whole speech that Janeway was giving about, let's all come together, we're all one, we're all working together, we were two crews and now we're one. It's like, that could have worked if it was worded differently and it was delivered differently and the circumstances were different. I kept thinking of what's his name, Edward James Olmos, inside of a BSG kind of scenario, giving that same speech with like the BSG crew hearing it with a couple words changed here and there. It could have worked. Like, if people were all still bitter about it somehow. Like, if some things were changed here and there, but the way that presented, no, it didn't work. Yeah, they were all in Starfleet uniforms.
Well, and by the way, the Maquis. The majority of the Maquis that we met were either Starfleet undercover.
Yeah, that's true.
Ex-Starfleet. Or went to Starfleet Academy and washed out. They're all Starfleet people.
Yeah,
so that fundamentally they didn't have any. I know in theory some of the extra characters were non-Starfleet that are floating around on the ship, but you don't really see that. What we have is Starfleet characters on a Starfleet ship, a bunch of disaffected teen Starfleet people who went off to be terrorists for a little while. No point in doing that anymore, because again, it's sort of the whole Maquis thing is undermined because since they're so far away, there's nothing they can do to benefit their cause. So all their terrorist stuff, it's not even like with Kira. Kira, having been a terrorist, was made. They used that. They used that when she taught the Cardassians how to be terrorists against their bad leaders and the Dominion and all that. And it, they had all sorts of character stuff that went into her guilt about that and all that stuff. They didn't do any of that in Voyager. There wasn't any like Chakotay being like, hey, you know how we defeat the Kazon this time? We use this old terrorist maneuver I learned back in the Maquis.
They get a couple extra tactics. That's
okay,
it.
Like I didn't see a whole lot of that show, but that didn't seem like there was very little mention of the fact that they were of the Maquis faction.
Right, it didn't matter. It could have been any other ship. It literally didn't matter who else they were, the way they presented it.
Doesn't really come up much after that.
And they, of course, conveniently kill the ship off, which could have made things interesting by having to work together.
The start of a flotilla, like in Battlestar.
Yeah, right, exactly. And no, they don't mention it. It could have been anything. It didn't matter that they were Maquis. At the beginning, they had the whole crawl that looked like Star Wars. Went to a fucking laser fight in space.
Yeah.
And then they're just like, oh, Maquis, this happened with the Maquis this. And yeah, they stopped talking about it.
Goofy Cardassian ship.
So, and another, just because I was thinking about it,
backdrops were cool in Voyager, by the way. I thought the backdrops were believable.
Oh yeah, no, and I thought
this underground city.
A lot of the special effects are cool.
Production value is good. Yeah. I think even with some of the character issues, I thought all the actors, for the most part, are really, really quite good at playing their role to the best of their ability. Mm-hmm. Garrett Wang wasn't given a lot to do with Harry Kim. It was like, you're an uptight dude. It was borderline Asian stereotype, which was.
I read that the actor.
Well, his name's Harry Kim.
I read that the actor is kind of lazy on set. I don't know. That's just what I read. That has nothing to do with what you said, but I just remember reading
it. Goes against the stereotype, which is good. But, there was a little bit of that, I've worked so hard and I've got to stick up my ass and I'm super, my parents are worried about my instrument. It was a little.
They warned us about.
I don't know if they were intended, if it's unfair to say they were doing sort of like a problematic stereotype for the first sort of prominent Asian actor. But that all aside, Garrett Wang, I thought, he inhabits that character very well. And he does a lot of interesting stuff with it throughout the show, relatively to the character. Again, what I was meant to say is all the characters, Dan, you were saying none of them particularly interesting, and I think that's true. It's not that they're like uninteresting people. It's just as characters, there's no robot. You know, there's no mind reading person. I mean, there are characters that are quote unquote interesting that I don't even like necessarily, but they at least are something. They're trying something different.
I didn't have any problem with any of the acting.
No, the acting's great. The production design's great. At this stage in Star Trek, they're doing there's some issues in the writing because I think they got a little lazy, and I don't know. I'd have to look more into it. My impression is that Voyager, it's a best intentions, but suffered from too much attention from the studio because too much was riding on it. Deep Space Nine and even TNG, those were syndicated shows. They produce the shows, they sell the shows to whatever networks want to buy them in the US and around the world. Voyager had to launch a network that was trying to attract a certain type of people. The UPN network wanted to attract a lot of middle America people, so maybe that's where there's a lot of this casual racism about Ferengi and Indians in here.
That Ferengi. That's another thing.
Didn't they teach him
about the Ferengi? And then the Quark all points out, now that's fucked up, blah 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 blah. But then the whole punchline is Paris says, "Didn't they teach you about the Ferengi that Harry Kim said at the beginning?" It's like
that's racist.
Yeah, right.
That's straight racist.
It's like somebody tries to call you out. The whole joke is I'm calling you out on racism, being, as part of my scheme, and then and then it begins with. By Morn. The Morn was in that. 932 was the Morn sighting.
I like the Morn.
And then there was a Morn Easter egg joke that Quark said about Lobi crystals or something.
Being produced by the Morn.
I acquired these Lobi crystals from a very strange creature called a Morn. And that's what he was trying to sell. That's what he was trying to scam to Harry Kim. Anyways.
But they don't really have anything there. It's you have a new guy. All right, Ensign Kim's a new guy.
He's a new guy.
Not terribly interesting. He
plays the clarinet. That was supposed to give him backstory and make him human, is because he plays the clarinet.
And he has a mother.
Yeah, and he has a mother.
Unlike every other character.
Right.
You have the Vulcan guy who. It's almost like it's self-defeating because the Tuvok is such a great Vulcan that it makes him almost less interesting. It's like he's like fucking 150 years old. He's solid. Mm-hmm. He's comfortable with himself. I mean, he doesn't have any horrible issues, or at least certainly not yet in the show.
He conveniently bridged the gap though between mystery and mystery solved, and the part where he's like, "I've completed my hypothesis," and he proceeds to tell him how everything goes. I mean, I know that that's what they do in shows, but that's what he was there for. That was his big role in that show, to sort of solve the mystery. I guess.
It made sense to give it to a Vulcan person because it's sort of you can excuse a little bit more of that from a Vulcan. It's sort of in their character, but. And the Paris character, as you noted, could have been more interesting than he was, but sort of you know the deal with all these characters at the end of the episode.
They set up this beef between Paris and Chakotay, and they just didn't go anywhere with it. The only point was to say Chakotay is honorable and Paris is an asshole, but it turns out Paris just doesn't know he's honorable yet for some reason, because he becomes honorable throughout the episode.
And you just you don't really care about these people that much.
You don't give a shit. That's why I say there's
the TNG characters, you learn throughout the show, you learn about their backstory, and you learn about them, and you want to learn about them, and it's cool.
There's so much at stake.
Who gives a shit about these people?
There's so much at stake, and I don't give a shit, And once again, biased because I know the rest of the show. But
the Voyager's tricky to talk about because for me, it's not even that it's bad. There are bad episodes of every Star Trek series, and some of the most beloved. TNG has some real clunkers.
The cartoon's pretty hilarious.
I like the cartoon.
We got to do a podcast.
We'll do the cartoon too. But the problem with Voyager is not even as bad. It's just boring.
Yeah, it's boring. Because looking at the episode, like you said, it's just a bunch of plot points. But looking at them, this should be really interesting. There's a lot of interesting things happening, but it's just kind of they're happening because the motives are not properly in place.
Think about this. Think about the whole you brought up earlier, the whole issue with B'Elanna and Harry are kidnapped, and then the people on the Voyager are worried and they want to help, right? And they want to figure out a way to help. and they're all acting as if they're dead or something. They're trying. They don't know, and sure they don't know, but they're confused as to what happened. They're like, we got sent back, but they didn't. What's going on? And if this were X-Files, that's where Mulder would have said, maybe they had something that this machine or whatever needed that we didn't have. He would have introduced that idea.
They don't have a Mulder.
And then they'd be like, oh, that's interesting. And then that would start laying the foundation for,
Right.
something's going on here that
Yeah, they
thing-
didn't build anything along the way.
Yeah.
They didn't build.
They just wait till the end until the guy says, "Oh yeah, some molecules are
some
close.
kind of pattern or
I want to make a
something."
baby with Harry Kim."
Yeah, it's like if you were walking down the street and then one day a house appears, but you never saw any construction workers or anything
They build those things fast these days.
They do, so maybe that's not a great point. But like you just never saw any evidence of the house appearing. It's just it's there. Now you go down the next day, another house, and all by the end you have a neighborhood. You don't. There's
Yeah, but the trick is by the time you get to the end of the street, you do have a neighborhood, but they're different houses than the ones you saw along the way.
That's right. Yeah.
Like you look back and you're like,
Like,
wait,
wait a
that
minute.
house that was a mid-century Rambler, and now it's a cookie cutter McMansion.
And they squeezed 7 seasons out of Star Trek Voyager.
Yeah, they went a long way, and there was plenty to
As many as
recommend.
most of the other series.
I haven't done a rewatch of Voyager in a long time. I'll probably try to work one in soon, but the issue is that it's fewer and further between the kind of real quality stuff, and even some of the most quality stuff that's worth watching on Voyager has this tinge, kind of as Dan was alluding to, of sort of disappointment because. Like the Year of Hell episodes, which are great, but then you think this should have been the entire show, know? And then when you think about the behind the scenes stuff where Ron Moore, he's finishing up on Deep Space Nine, there's this whole like Voyager thing going on, and he was thinking. He went on to do with Battlestar Galactica what he thought Voyager should have been.
Right.
And that's why he did the Battlestar Galactica. I mean, that's really what drove him, because he was getting frustrated. Why does the Voyager have unlimited shuttle pods and unlimited resources? And every time they get the shit beaten out of them, their ship is fixed by the next week and stuff. It's fine if that's the case, but it's just not as interesting. It'd be more interesting if, you, as you said, Dan, get a flotilla. Start getting alien races coming with you and like teaming up, And they do a little of that, but not.
It's just some creepy dude you find in the scrap.
Well,
right.
And it's because they set up, and here's I mean, we got to finish up soon, I think, but the fundamental issue is they set up a plot for a serialized show, and then they produced an episodic show, right?
Mm-hmm.
They set up a plot which was, we are fucking stuck far away, and we got to get our asses home and hopefully survive the process. And it's going to take a long time, and it's going to be challenging, right? And so blah, 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 blah. That's the premise. And then it's episode. Yeah, occasionally, maybe this will get us home. Oh, no, it won't. Okay, maybe this will get us home. Oh, no, it won't. Maybe this will get us home. Oh, part 2, no, it didn't.
Yeah, right.
So until the end, and then they're like, okay, now we're home. And then, that's a whole nother thing. Maybe we'll do finales at some point, because the Voyager finale is not uninteresting, but it's kind of like, okay, we're home. End.
I kept thinking about Inspector Gadget. Like it's like every episode he's trying to find Dr. Claw, and he can't for some reason. And every time I'd see it, it's like, as a kid, I'd be like, maybe he'll find him this time. And then he doesn't find him. And then Voyager, it's like, oh, I've seen this before. I mean, it happens a lot, but it's just. There's nothing wrong with that.
No. They're not only is there nothing wrong with it, there's a place for it. I love
Yeah.
episodic TV.
No, episodic TV is great, and that's not what I'm saying.
There's
is bad.
There's a dearth of it now.
I'm just saying, like, it's just like, there is a dearth. That's
but
very
the
true.
premise was a serialized story, but it was an episodic show.
Yes,
And that's a
yes,
problem.
yes.
That's what doesn't work.
Right.
TNG works as episodic, and you can do. You can still work in character development over time and fill it, but fundamentally you tune into TNG because you want to see what adventures, what philosophical quandary they're going to face this week. What's going to happen? Is Riker going to be more prominent in this episode or not?
Is he going to fall in love with a man?
Is he going to put his leg over the chair?
Yeah. He's going to play the trombone this time.
But
Blackbird.
But Voyager,
He wasn't that good at trombone, actually, was he?
I think he's okay.
He was okay. He always had trouble with that.
He
one,
could.
too.
There was
the
that one
Blackbird.
solo.
It was a black. I think it was Blackbird.
Black-
Yeah, that solo.
Yeah, Solo and Blackbird.
Yeah, that's a good episode.
How's my Troy impression? Blackbird. Blackbird.
Are you Scandinavian? Wait.
Blackbird. Blackbird.
Are you an old woman from Belarus? Excuse me.
Excuse me. I want you to play Blackbird,
You're blocking the door.
How fucked up is that? Is Troy? Come on, Troy. You know he's having trouble. Don't force him to embarrass
Yeah,
himself
that
in
was
front of all his
fucked up.
friends.
That's what she's trying to do. She was pushing buttons.
He's playful. You know, Troy's a playful one.
But they still have the awesome no spill mugs in Voyager. Paris was holding a no spill mug
Yeah.
when they were on
Yeah,
DS9.
my mom had one of those.
I like
Really?
I think
Those are awesome.
The production
Really?
value
Those
is
are
good.
awesome mugs. I didn't know they actually made them.
Yeah, no, you could totally buy those, and they were just using them as props.
Did they-
and, like maybe painting them different colors?
But I think again, it's not bad. People should watch Voyager. I think it's fun. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. It's Star Trek for the most part.
Right.
It's a little boring at times, a little annoying at times, but even some of the production value stuff, which was really high, but it's not the execution of the production value. It's the decision making. For example, it made perfect sense that the bridge is smaller, more confined, sort of more almost militaristic. It makes sense. It's a smaller ship, etc. But that's the setup.
it's not a Galaxy class starship.
Exactly.
It's an Intrepid class.
but at the same time,
or does that mean
just because it makes sense doesn't mean it doesn't
It
make
means
you
there's
feel
another
a little,
ship called the Intrepid.
You know, that screen was kind of tiny, and I don't know. There was something less inviting about that bridge. And again, I know that's by design and all that, but I'm saying in terms of enjoying and watching the show, especially you're going to be there. A lot of Voyager takes place on the bridge.
how big is the Voyager compared to the Enterprise? In the Enterprise bleepity blop or whatever it's
The
called.
D?
The D, yeah.
The D's.
NZC.
I think it's like, I don't know, half the size or something like that.
looks
It's
kinda
small.
So it's like a maneuverable fight ship or something.
It's a science. It was meant to be a sort of
Science.
science ship. It wasn't really a
Science ship.
fighting ship.
They did the whole fucking we got 14 types of tomato soup, but they all taste like shit. Like, why did they throw that joke in there? Why was he so mad at
What
that thing?
kind of tomato soup did they have at the fucking prison colony?
Yeah, right.
That's a good point. Maybe he wants to go back. Maybe
What
that's how
is
they
his
keep you there.
problem?
Yeah, he got so mad at that
Oh,
replicator.
I don't even think this counts as a nitpick, just an observation. I want to know what the fuck Paris was doing at the beginning. They're all, he's all like jamming away at something, or like he's like on top of some cage or something.
Weird aliens wandering around.
I don't know what you're doing. Like, this is what you do in Starfleet prison. They just have you kind of do some handyman shit on meaningless things that don't look like anything.
And like all of a sudden, Starfleet has some prisons. Like what the?
Yeah, no. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in '90s Star Trek that's a little weird with the whole. Deep Space Nine directly confronts the idea that the Federation is all good, and in fact makes the argument in a
Right.
lot of ways that it's not always good. Not just the Federation itself, but almost the philosophical concept is problematic because it has inherent flaws. This idea of bringing all these people together and somehow magically everything's going to be great. And we find out with the Section 31 and everything that maybe things aren't so great all the time.
It's interesting that DS9 weaseled the idea of currency into the whole Star Trek universe, because they mentioned Latinum as Paris is after Latinum as one of his things. It's like what Chakotay's like what they give you, Paris? Latinum?
Credits.
Girls, credits,
Right.
poo poo,
He
like
named some Cardassian currency.
yeah.
Well, and I
That's not really a problem I have. It's just interesting.
No, I seem to remember one of the writers on Deep Space Nine saying, "Yeah, we did that because it made sense."
Yeah,
Like,
right,
It's
it
one thing to
does.
say the Federation doesn't really deal with this, but obviously they're going to deal with other cultures that do deal with this.
Yeah.
And it's frankly more interesting. And by the way, on TOS and stuff, they always had credits. It was really.
Yeah.
It was TNG that tried to make it all. There's no crime, and that was Roddenberry's philosophical position.
And drove the writers crazy, probably.
It did, and it's because it doesn't make any sense. Ultimately, it's you can't have a utopia. There's no drama in a utopia, right? It
right.
doesn't mean you can't dream of a utopia. Maybe a utopia is great, but for a television program about a utopia would be boring. What you want is a television program about a near utopia that's constantly under the threat of being undermined, to tell dramatic stories about the lessons about how to not undermine it, how to keep it together. Especially nowadays, that would be great. And that's what Deep Space Nine did really well, is to say, A, things are not as perfect as you think.
Right.
And B, what we do have is tenuous, and the second it's threatened by, on TNG they did a little bit with the Borg, but on Deep Space Nine they did it with the Changelings and with the Klingons and stuff. As soon as you put a little bit of stress on those ideals, they can collapse pretty fucking quick, especially with all the fucking evil admirals and all that shit. They're pretty quick to be able to be like, fuck this noise, let's just genocide some people. And that's a more interesting conversation to have. Voyager goes back a little bit to the whole like, oh no, Starfleet and the Federation is automatically good. Our presence in this Delta Quadrant, these are a bunch of fucking mongrel people, and we're going to like go around spreading our goodness because we're the Federation, and we're going to follow all the Federation rules.
In the crawl, it even says some people consider the Maquis heroes, but to the Federation and the Cardassia, they're outlaws.
They're
and it's like,
totally outlaws.
and that's a great place to be like, well, this can be explored more. You know, And it's
exactly.
Like,
So
nope.
they had the old. They were part of the Federation, but then the Federation switcherooed them, and now they're in the Cardassian space.
Yeah, the long and the short of it is
So they're pissed.
it's analogous in some ways to the Israeli-Palestine conflict, where if you switch, if you want to make a border, and even if both governments agree to the border, the actual people living there who are on the side that all of a sudden now they're under control of different people, or they have more control. That was the issue, and that was sort of the analogy they were going for. I agree. It's something fascinating they could have explored.
Yeah.
Especially because it's an interesting concept to be like, okay, you're defined as a terrorist, and you're defined as a law and order type. You have these two groups of characters.
Yeah.
What do you do when both of those characters are removed from the context that creates those definitions?
Yeah, right.
Right? Now, the answer in Voyager is, well, within about a day and a half, you're all good.
You're all Starfleet officers. Yeah.
Is that realistic? Who knows? Maybe that's what we should hope for. Is it interesting to watch on television?
No.
Maybe that's just how Starfleet works.
Well, like the thing is how Starfleet works. What?
Maybe I'm saying maybe that's just how they work in Starfleet. It's just like, okay, you guys can be in Starfleet.
Yeah, and
you're qualified to be my first fucking officer.
Everybody reports to you now.
Yeah.
Everybody secretly wants to be in Starfleet.
Yeah,
But,
that's
like,
the other assumption.
That's the other thing is like they
right.
just didn't have a high enough rank. That's why
She's
they
the
were
captain.
That's why they started the
Observer.
That's why they started the. That's why Chakotay was in the Maquis. It was really because he wasn't like first officer yet, and
Yeah.
he didn't have enough power. So he was like, he was just like, well, they're not going to let me in Starfleet with my attitude, so I'm just going to go off and do this. And then when they're like, okay, we'll make you first officer, he's like, oh, I have honor, but yeah, that's okay.
Well, and it's another example of where they went the right direction in Deep Space Nine, where Jake Sisko never wanted to be in Starfleet. He never wanted. He's the son of a Starfleet officer. You expect everyone wants to be in Starfleet, as you say, because that's always what Star Trek says. Because we always see it from the Starfleet perspective. So
Because
everyone
like Wesley,
says everyone's
got to be
in
in Starfleet.
Everyone's got to be in it because we're only seeing things from the Starfleet perspective. Now we see a kid who doesn't want to be in Starfleet, even though his dad is in it. In fact, he's nervous about it because he's worried that his dad will be upset. And his dad's like, fuck, I don't give a fuck what you want to do. You don't have to be in Starfleet.
But his dad does have to deal with his like hooligan friend wanting to be in Starfleet.
Yes, and that's amazing, And as we've already demonstrated, Starfleet clearly heavily racist towards Ferengis for some
Oh,
reason.
right, because that dude ends up being in Starfleet.
Yeah, he
doesn't
ends up being Nog becomes the first Ferengi in Starfleet.
Yeah.
But it's fucked up, man. But anyway, I guess we should wind it up. But any other thoughts internally or externally?
I hit on all my points about the
We both like
male
internal things.
admirals and Gavin O'Hurley. I got all that shit.
The show like that's the thing is the show really had a lot. It did have a lot going for it. It was almost there. It almost had it right.
there.
And that's what I was saying. Like
Almost.
even down to the final speech Janeway gave. If they changed a couple of her words and some of the vibe, and they changed the atmosphere, and they changed like the general like sort of like emotion and feeling and ambiance of the characters in the room. That could have been twisted to work right, given also that the history leading up to that point worked as well.
Yeah.
And it just and all the stuff was there. It's just they backed out at the last minute or something. So it's nothing like it's the actors were good. The story had a lot going for it. Like it was all there. It
Had a lot of promise.
It just fluffed apart.
It had a lot of
and it didn't have
promise.
to. I don't think.
No.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20. It's hard.
Right.
It's hard when people are working on things, and it's tricky. And I get the impression they got a lot of studio interference.
That's the thing.
And pressure and
Those
a lot
Paramount
of
motherfuckers.
and it's probably most useful to hold it up as an example, a key example of this is what happens when you put too much pressure on one thing. The tendency is to kind of mellow everything out, mellow it all out, do the average, lowest common denominator, and that's uninteresting.
And that's what I feel must have happened to the Caretaker to some respect, because the Caretaker had the vibes like it should have been much more sinister, because he just came off as stupid and inept. He was supposed to be, oh really, I care about these people. I care about these people, but you'll kill a bunch of other people to try to save them. You fucking fucked up their shit, and by driving them to the ground, and then once they're on the ground, you coddle them too much. You don't fucking suddenly you didn't think the Kazon were gonna fucking attack you at some point. Maybe you did, and that's why you were gonna self-destruct, but you didn't think that one out well enough either. I don't know. It seems
Telosians are much cooler than that guy.
Yeah, totally. But yeah,
I did like the banjo.
Banjo was cool. I mean, the actor
was all
awesome.
right.
Yeah, the actor was good.
Yeah, but even the whole line was like, "No, I didn't make him sick. It just murdered them." And say it. A couple of things, I guess. Compression phaser rifles. They had compression phaser rifles.
Anglabask. Tri-cobalt devices.
Oh yeah, break out the compression phaser rifle.
Yes, and after that
was a tight line.
Yeah, right.
Break them out.
They went to the hologram world.
Go get 'em.
They went to the hologram world, which was for some reason the same. I don't know. Anyways, but when they got warped back, and this doesn't really translate over a podcast, but at Mark 3740, there's I think it's a hilarious scene where they just got transported back from that hologram planet when they brought the compression phaser rifles. And then it's Janeway, focused on Janeway staring forward, and then the three people, Paris and whoever else around him holding the rifles are around him, and then they just kind of disperse in different directions. And she's just standing there looking. And if you watch them disperse, it just totally looks like okay, we're here now. Let's go back to moving. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's really hard to explain, but it's just something really funny about the execution of that. It's really awkward.
I thought it was weird to watch people in Star Trek go up an escalator. Like in a mall. Nothing wrong with it. It's just it stood out somehow. It was okay. There's Janeway and crew, and they're just kind of riding an escalator. It just looks like a normal escalator.
The B'Elanna pulled the patented Star Trek double axe handle.
Yeah,
that was great.
Classic Kirk / Klingon style fighting.
I appreciate that.
Neelix is a molester.
He's a molester
and a thief and a liar.
Yeah, and he's like
a completely unnecessary character.
He's kind of a sociopath, you know, like he wanted to abandon them at first, but then he was going to help them. I guess the reason he helped them, he decided to help Paris when he was going to save Chakotay, was we wanted to look good in front of his baby or something like that, or I don't know.
There was that very odd and sort of out of place silhouette shot of Harry, Kim, and B'Elanna Torres when they were, in some sort of tunnel or alley in the Ocampa underground land. It was taken from real far away, kind of a modern shot in a lot of ways, but it stood out a little because it just didn't sort of fit in with the rest of the direction in the show. It wasn't bad. It was just sort of, again, it seemed inconsistent.
I kept getting a sexual tension vibe between the two of them. I don't know. Maybe I was just like might have been fantasizing about like I wanted to be in that scenario.
I was watching with Jamie, and Jamie has never seen this before. And during the scene where they B'Elanna and Harry both wake up in the they've just been abducted, so they both wake up. And they're both kind of like, what's going on? B'Elanna starts freaking out. She starts fighting with all the doctors and shit, until they subdue her. And the whole time, Jamie's like, why isn't that, Harry Kim helping her? He's sitting up and just watching.
Yeah.
And, I defended him. I said, he doesn't know the deal. He doesn't know who she is. Really, he knows she's a Maquis. And stuff. But you could say it was them characterizing him as a fresh Starfleet officer, but I don't know. I would think the young Starfleet officer would do the opposite. I think he would act too quickly to want to fight and want to help her, but I don't know. In
BSG, he would have done that. It was his first Starfleet mission.
BSG, he would have put like a screwdriver through one of the doctor's eyes.
This is Harry's first Starfleet mission, and it's a total failure for him. Paris's first Maquis mission was a total failure for him. So they were a match made in heaven.
And this was pretty much a success for that other Paris motherfucker.
And I do think that they, I think there was more sexual chemistry between Harry Kim and Paris than anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also like that part where
the
doc is all like tricorder, and he's like, a medical tricorder.
Yeah. Why was the doctor? I mean, I'm not complaining. It's a funny running gag, but like he gets so frustrated when they don't turn him off. You know, like I guess he's programmed to get. What does he do? No, but what does he do? Because the implication is there's one episode where he talks about like how he likes to be turned off. But now is he unconscious? Like if we were dead for a while and coming back or asleep, or is he doing computer things like when he's turned off?
I think they go back and forth throughout the series. The Doctor is, of course, one of the more fun and interesting characters.
Yeah.
You know, interesting.
He's so frustrated. It's like, when's the rest of the staff supposed to get here?
I retract the interesting. He's fun. He is. Robert Picardo is a fantastic actor.
It's a great character.
The character is fun. They do a couple kind of interesting philosophical things with him, but for the most part, he's mostly comic relief. You know, later on, they definitely do.
Well, Neelix is supposed to be some kind of comic relief.
Neelix is a fucking disaster. He's a fucking disaster. It could be the reason why I just don't like watching this show. Is fucking Neelix.
It's really bad.
Well, and the actor doesn't do a bad job.
Oh no.
That actor is fine.
He does. He actually does a really good job.
Oh no, he's amazing.
Yeah,
he's an amazing actor. He's playing the character the way they want him to play the character. It's just the character's a bad character.
Yeah.
And with the Doctor, it's tricky because yes, he's supposed to be an emergency hologram. They try to set it up as that's going to be a problem. It doesn't really become a problem
because it's the fucking future.
Yeah, and it's kind of like with what we've talked about with Q and with Kai Opaka and stuff. Occasionally they create a character where it's like ooh, we've kind of written ourselves into a corner because we're trying to put limitations on something where it doesn't really make sense. They try to play around with it a little bit in later on in terms of problems arise because he's on too much, but he appears to be sentient right from the start. It gets into that. It's the kind of funny thing where it's like there's all this philosophical stuff they should be playing around with that they kind of don't. Like, is it okay to have a slave robot thing?
Right, exactly. That's precisely like from the crawl, like like going back to the Maquis, they're heroes and outlaws, and right, you said this other philosophical stuff,
and then
they don't explore. They present it, but don't do anything.
Well, interestingly, on Deep Space Nine, they help explain some of the stuff with the Doctor in that the guy who designs him, Dr. Zimmerman. He shows up on Deep Space Nine, and he's kind of an asshole. Yeah. And so you learn that's why the Doctor's kind of brusque and an asshole, because he was based off of this guy.
That's why he has a personality and shit. Like,
exactly.
Like if you're only they only turn you on in an emergency, and you would prefer to not be on. Like, how do you have a personality?
Right. Yeah, Dagon was a character. There's a guy Tosca. Was that telepathic wimpy dude? Dagon.
I like the attractive Beta Z shuttle pilot.
Oh yeah, right.
She gets killed.
Hold on. This was both because we're going way long here, but I gotta say this was both the best and worst, or alternatively worst and best part of the episode for me, yours truly, which was. Do you always fly at women? Do you always fly at women at warp speed, Mr. Paris? Only when they're in visual range. The nerdiest,
doesn't
most
even make any
fucked up
sense.
Star Trek fan could not make that up. I don't know. It's so mind-bogglingly. There's so much to unpack.
It's like sub fan fiction, like not even.
There's so much to unpack about just that interaction as portrayed by the characters, the meta-analysis of the writers writing it down in the first place, and then further thinking it's a good idea. Then the producers and the studio thinking, yes, let's move forward with this. The actors saying those lines willingly.
Real smooth talker, right? At Paris.
And again, okay, you're trying to set up Paris as sort of like an aggressive, asshole, but no, he's not actually. Oh, and she dies anyway, so.
Yeah, oh well.
She dies pretty much right away.
Oh well.
Penal.
When that other dude jumps up in the air and she dies.
Warp 9.975, 15 decks, 141 crew complement.
Dude. Next week I'm bringing my game to this shit because you're always kicking everybody's ass.
No,
Look at these
it's just
notes. You have
obsessive.
pages of notes.
It's just obsessive. It's really just.
I'm gonna watch the next one like every day.
No, it's
starting tomorrow.
I swear to you, it's not.
So by the end of the week, I'll be like, okay, now I got ideas.
It's not me being hardworking. It's me obsessing over things. This is what I want to do whenever anything happens because I want to make sure I witness it.
I got more free time than any of you, so I'm gonna put that in.
It's
I want nothing but facts and figures on Enterprise. The first broken bow.
Like this dude over here's got some children, and you have a job, and he has a job, and I have a job too, but I have lots of free time. So.
70,000 light years away. That's how far they are.
It'll take 75 years at top speed.
There's just really not much backstory going on with any of the stuff in Voyager.
I'm looking forward to next week. Next week, everyone, we will be discussing Enterprise, the pilot season of pilot episode of Enterprise.
I saw that one when it aired.
Me too. Yeah.
And then
I saw most of this when they aired.
I never saw another after that.
Enterprise.
I was in Richmond.
Enterprise has a lot that's similar in terms of the problems related to Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
I think is more successful in some ways.
Is that that's a post 2001?
It was
post 9/11.
It's very interesting actually because it was produced prior to 2001.
Right.
I think the first
They released
episode.
it
Yeah.
after.
I think the first episode. I forget if it was right after or right before, but it was within a couple weeks. I think.
I forget. Right.
That it premiered.
That's what I'm not sure about.
And but it was all produced obviously, and Enterprise, we'll discuss it in more detail next week. Enterprise goes up and down because they have some of the same issues in terms of being like the focus of the producers and the network and everything, and having some writing issues here and there, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in Enterprise, and I think they take some of the mistakes they made in Voyager and fix them a little bit in Enterprise.
Yeah, they do. But on the other hand, Voyager, at least you can always say they're trying to get home. Enterprise, you're just kind of like
exactly. There's a little bit more aimless,
Yeah.
and then of course Enterprise has a whole like September 11th style. The whole third season is basically a right wing fantasy, and it's
I know what you're talking about.
It can turn you off. That whole Zindi arc.
Scott Bakula is kind of a cool guy.
Scott Bakula is awesome.
Yeah,
And-
I do.
and-
I like Enterprise, and I think it's charming.
And it wouldn't, and a lot of Enterprise wouldn't work without Scott Bakula. He
Exactly,
he like
right.
fucking carries a lot of that show.
I thought Paris, the first scene, could have worked as Judge Reinhold. I don't know. I was getting a Judge Reinhold vibe. A young.
Oh,
if it
that
was
would've been
younger. If it was
awesome.
a younger Judge Reinhold, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe
Like
it wouldn't
hire Judge Reinhold instead.
like it,
Lucarno.
like if this was like 10 years earlier or whatever.
Right.
maybe-
10 years earlier.
It probably totally-
Seinfeld.
Probably, yeah. I don't know if it would have worked at all, but I just kept looking at him and thinking, what would Judge Reinhold do?
Hey,
in
I'm
this
looking
spot?
at you.
I just
thinking
kept thinking,
Judge Reinhold.
you know.
Welcome to
hey,
Mr. Reinhold's court.
Why not Judge Reinhold? Why not?
Mock trial with Jay Reinhold.
They got these space aliens running their ships into an array and then can't get back home. Why not Judge Reinhold?
Who are these Ocampa?
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, next week, Enterprise.
Gavin O'Hurley.
Dan will have lots of facts and figures as usual. Jesse's going to have a insane amount of facts and figures, presumably about Enterprise. But I encourage you bring any facts.
All
and figures.
sorts of other digressions.
It can have nothing to do with Enterprise.
No, it'll all have something to do with it.
But Enterprise, a lot of interesting stuff coming up on
2,100 kilopascals was the warp core pressure.
1.21 gigawatts.
23. Doctor's first appearance was at 2320.
It's
First
funny
Morn
because
sighting is
Tom,
932.
what was I thinking?
Because it's actually pronounced gigawatts.
I know.
And
And you wouldn't say
but I didn't know
0.21.
that.
You
One
wouldn't
time
say-
I was talking to my grandfather. He was like an engineer, and he
got
was like,
mad
"No,
at
it's
you.
gigawatts."
You're like, no, but Doc Brown says
I was
gigawatts.
like, "What about gigawatts?" He's like, "No, there's a gigawatt."
And you wouldn't say 0.21. You'd say 0.21.
1.21 gigawatts?
The actual
That's right.
Paris holding a mug was at 10 minutes and 30 seconds was when Paris was holding the mug.
All right, Jesse, I don't think you're going to be able to compete with this.
No,
It's just an obsession.
He's got, like,
I'm going,
timestamps.
but
It's
I'm
not
gonna,
work ethic. It's an obsession.
I'm going to have a lot more to bring.
All right,
That's,
good.
I'm not going to top this guy.
Nah.
No,
Dog Pound's got it.
I'm just trying to tell you it's not necessarily a beneficial or good thing that I'm doing. It's just a thing that I do.
I'm not criticizing you at all.
No, I know you're not. I know-
I think this is outstanding.
No, I know you're not criticizing me, and I actually, I'm just telling you, it's not like don't feel like I'm working so hard. It's just what I do.
It's just what I do.
It's just my thing.
It's what I do. This is the thing.
It's
fantastic.
It's the same reason I have to tap on the door 3 times before I leave the house and stuff, you know.
All right. So we're going to look up local mental health services, social services. Don't get mad at that term. That's it's there for the community to help. We'll get you hooked up
You
with
should just
somebody.
use these bongos over here.
Yeah, bang on some bongos, do the bongo treatment, and then next week we'll talk about Enterprise, and then the week after that, fast forward to Discovery, because a lot of time happens in between Enterprise and Discovery. So we'll be
Then
sort
maybe
of,
the cartoon.
yeah. Let's do the cartoon after that. I'm looking forward to that. But we will, after Enterprise, we'll be emerging from. We're like it's the tail end of the
Enterprise.
first kind of. I don't know what you
Got
call it,
Becky
golden
with it.
age or whatever of Star Trek, where they had so much Star Trek on at once, and then boom, it's gone for a long time after that,
Forever.
almost until now. But
Because it's not technically like broadcast.
well, yes, that's true. But they're producing a television show. We can agree on that. Excellent.
Sorry.
All right. Anyway,
In a way that
I have to piss. That's good enough for now. Good night.
Nah.
Scotty, you're changing my mind about Betazoids.
Good.
Oh, that wasn't a compliment. Until today, I always considered your people warm and sensual.
I can be warm and sensual.
Just not to me.
Do you always fly at women at warp speed, Mr. Paris?
Only when they're in visual range.